Gosh, in that 12th house moon. So the moon rules the first house. That's the difficult thing there. Your first house, you have this wonderful Venus. You're probably very charming. You know, people I'm sure like you, but you just don't like yourself. I'm I'm sorry. I don't mean, I'm not trying to put that like that. I'm just saying that usually there's some sort of depression going. You know, we have a tendency to hide ourselves, or it's, we can have this wonderful disposition outwardly, and at the same time have this, this really negative self-talk, and this, you know, I don't want to say hyperbolic words, but just, we don't like ourselves very much. Often we treat ourselves very badly, and sometimes treating ourselves very badly leads to bad behavior, coping behavior. And I'm not saying any behavior is necessarily bad. I come from a family of addicts, right? And it is what it is. It's a disease, it's an illness, and it's something that a lot of us have to deal with. And I can say this because I come from a family of addicts. And just, I know about all this stuff, you know? And I'm not saying that's your position at all, or necessarily your situation. I'm just saying it is something we frequently see. And the 12th house is the house of self-undoing. It's the self-destructive behavior. It's where we thwart ourselves. It's where we undermine our own best interests. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies, aren't we? And something tells me you were probably bullied as a kid, a little bit. I'm sure you were kind of popular in a way, right? I mean, Sun in the 11th house tends to be. But then Chiron in the 11th house, and yes, I still look at Chiron. I make fun of all the other stuff, but it often indicates people who were shunned by their peers as children, who were made fun of or bullied. I always say it's like being the last kid picked for dodgeball, and it can feel very alone. And when the moon is in the 12th house, that compounds it. That's very lonely, right? It's a very lonely moon. And the moon is opposite Neptune. And when I see the moon opposite Neptune, I think of addiction. Just, it's my first thought often. Sometimes we see psychic stuff. But I always tell people to be very careful with psychic phenomena, because, you got to keep your feet on the ground. And a lot of psychic phenomena is just, it's nonsense. It's fantasy. It's stuff that's just going to get us stuck, right? I mean, we can have all this wonderful synchronicity, and someone earlier talked about dreaming the birth time, and that's awesome. That's wonderful. You have to attend to reality. Reality comes first. One of my spiritual mentors told me in my 20s, he said, if you ever have to choose between the spiritual life and daily life, you always have to choose daily life. Gurji, one of the gurus I followed early on, he said, you can't do this work unless you're a good householder. You have to have proven that you can actually handle life. If you can't do your work as an effective person in the world, then you have no business going off into spiritual land or la la land or whatever, because then it just ends up becoming another crutch, another illusion, another drug, essentially. And that's where you see the spiritual path littered with the shells of broken minds, right? That have shattered themselves on fantasy, getting stuck in misplaced beliefs, and quite honestly avoiding the center, right? And please don't take this quote the wrong way, but Carl Jung said, the root of mental illness is the unwillingness to face legitimate suffering. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, because it sounds like victim blaming, doesn't it? But I can say from my own experience, there's something about that, because a lot of my own issues, especially the codependency stuff, right? And my difficulty in relationships, a lot of that had to deal with me facing and having to deal with legitimate suffering, but, having to face a lot of these things, and realizing that the relationship path I was on with marriage and monogamy and all this sort of, it wasn't going to work for me. And the quicker I stop trying to fit myself into that mold, the better. I'm only mentioning that because you see, with these sorts of things, it's never a death sentence, right? The chart is there for us to become aware of our patterns. It's not there for us to be like, oh, woe is me. You know, there's a certain amount that's faded from the chart that we have to deal with, right? And then how we deal with it is our destiny. That's what we make out of life. Fate is what happens to us. Destiny is what we do with it. You have a box of crayons that you're given at the beginning. It's up to you what picture you paint with those, right? How you color with them. Some people, like when I was a kid, I was very artistic. I could take a box of 5 or 6 crayons and make all kinds of wild stuff because I knew how to use those crayons. So it doesn't matter well, it does matter because it sucks to get the crappy box, doesn't it? It sucks. It sucks when you're born with chronic illness. It sucks when you're born, with, parents who do this or that, whatever. But you can always choose you can choose to make it your own, and you could choose how to paint with that. I mean, and that's not victim blaming, I would. So anyway, we got to move on to another one. So sorry. I just think it was worth taking that opportunity to mention that.